Yeah, let's get started. Yeah, that's pretty much me. So I think it all started with that T-shirt, that He-Man T-shirt. Just kind of moved forward with that as far as creativity, right? You got the Ash Wash jeans, the Crocs.
Yeah, and you come a long way, man. You're styling.
Shirt is it transcends, right? So pretty much, I've been with Product Madness for roughly 8 years, but 14 years before that, I was in advertising. So Whiting, Kennedy, Ogilvy. So it just kind of snowballed into a performance marketing role. Yeah, so it was acquired by Aristocrat in 2013. And yeah, just experienced firsthand the evolution of ads and user acquisition through those channels.
Great. So I think it's important to note for everybody here, like I love having you tell your story because I don't think it's told enough in the industry. Like Jay runs the creative team at Product Madness. We hear a lot from the user acquisition managers in the industry, but rarely from people in Jay's role. So we're gonna dive deep into what you do and how you run your team and how you built your team. And I think it's important for the audience to know that if you're not doing a great job producing creative today, there's a lot here that you can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the most part, let's just have fun. If you have any questions, please chime in. Let's go from there.
Cool.
Product Madness circa 2010 here. Literally, that's pretty much us as a team. You had the community managers, the CRM managers, 2 data scientists, which is pretty impressive at that time for a bootstrap company. And yeah, and a creative guy right there. I'm actually taking a picture so you don't see me in there. I mean, as you can see, very rough, very rugged. See the butcher paper? There's a lot of documentation on that. There's no whiteboard, so we did our best financially, economically. So
that's the stage of a startup I love the most, when everybody's just around one table, kind of all together. A lot gets done at that point. For anyone who's not familiar with Product Madness, maybe you could just walk us through some of the timeline, because you guys have evolved into becoming an enormous company now.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is pretty much a timeline in itself. Between 2007 and 2010, we did a bunch of social shopping games, hence the barcode in the logo, and kind of went from there. We actually did RPG games, which is semi-successful, but obviously running it on Facebook, they took 30%, so we came out with pretty much nothing. Once we realized that there was a lot of monetization to be had in social casino, we started pivoting towards that. So between 2010 and 2011 was pretty much a lot of experimentals in terms of old McDonald's slot machines, Big City Bingo, and Blackjack Madness. So that was pretty much the genesis of it. And once we saw that we can actually monetize the product and just kind of scale it to a certain level, that was the birth of just the slot machine core business in itself. So you have Hollywood Spins, team slots, 3D slots, and celebrity slots. And obviously, as you all know, Aristocrat acquired us, and just that in itself kind of went astronomical in terms of scale. Roles got specialized, and the bifurcation between London and San Francisco offices came into fruition. And now we have 4 live apps that are fairly successful. Heart of Vegas is #1 in Australia. We have Cashman Casino, Fa 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 Gold, which is our APAC game. And our newest title is Lightning Link Casino. So that's looking promising.
Yeah, that's a newly launched game. Like, that's only been live a few months now, right?
Actually, yeah, like a month or so, month and a half.
Yeah, it's really exciting because it's a well-known land-based IP that the players really love. So, yeah, like, you guys have really become a global company, and you guys have made acquisitions too recently as well, Plarium and Big Fish. So you're becoming one of the biggest mobile game companies in the industry. Yeah. So it's pretty exciting.
It's very interesting too with Big Fish, since we have like overlaps and kind of synergies that's in place. So that relationship is actually working out pretty well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you guys end up doing together and how that gets organized. So the next example we have up on the board here, can you walk us through too? Because you've been there since the very beginning. It's really interesting. Like, how has your role changed? I mean, you went from being the only one to now you manage this team that you've laid out for us. Like, walk us through like that structure and how did you end up evolving it in this direction, and like what are the capabilities here on the board?
Yeah, I think this diagram kind of shows it all, right? I mean, we have 4 live games. The acronyms HOV, CMCs for Cashman, Fa Go for Triple FG, and Lightning Link. I mean, those are independent games, obviously, but they do have lead artists, and they have each one has a designated designer working under them. VIP it's a beast all in itself, handling obviously monetized players at that scale, and we're actually really trying to get into obviously organics. I mean, there's 2 sides of it. There's paid and organic, and so ASO and re-engagement is part of that component, and there's 2 designers under that to just be floaters in a sense, to have some sort of balance. Right,
and like I see in the upper right too, you have 3 remote studios. What is their function?
Yeah, so everything in-house. So what you see from the bottom down is all internal. It's all created in-house. So that's a lot of complex creations, concepts that we build in-house. And once we find that winning performing ad, we actually scale that up. Hence the remote studio. So let's say for ad networks, we need 17 different sizes for a video. So we'll send off that performing video to those remote studios, and then they'll scale that up. So we'll get it within like a week and a half. So I mean, based on that, and on top of the aggressive A/B testing that our user acquisition team does, it's a great marriage in that sense. It just works like as a clock.
Yeah, it's like I'm glad that people can hear just how many resources go into this, right. Because yeah, too often, I meet other clients and they're kind of like in the state you were 8 years ago or whatever. It's just like, oh, we have one person that sometimes makes a video. Yeah, it's just not going to support performance at scale. Yep. So the next little bit here is more of a breakdown of exactly what your capabilities are. What can you tell us here exactly?
So this is just a creative glimpse into the madness that goes on into the office, especially we call it the dungeon because it's all dark. So this is what pretty much we talk about in terms of deliverables. We have 3 categories, 3 bins. We have weekly, bi-monthly, and monthly creatives. As you can see, I mean, this is a very high-level view, but there's a lot that goes on in terms of deliverables. And this is outside of actually submitting it to the remote studios to scale. So we have HOV, it's all the same across the board, but obviously the biggest thing at this point is bi-monthly, which is the HTML5 playables, as you all know, is the next generation of ads. And right under that is just the re-engagement ads, which we're slowly, it's getting traction, but we do tie these in with, the sales, holidays, new release titles, and such. That's about 90% of what we deliver on a monthly basis, and obviously the 10% is contingencies. There's always last-minute requests, and just
right.
Ad hoc requests.
Yeah, I mean, all this sums up to, you talk a lot about, volume and velocity. Yep. And yeah, like the capabilities that you're demonstrating here are really, they're second to none. We don't really see many teams that can compete with you guys. Right. The next thing that I always find fascinating, you manage this team and you built this team. Walk us through like the expectations setting about like what you expect this team to deliver and how they go about that.
Sure. So these are pretty much bare bones of the expectations for any team member that comes on board or that's already existing. The harmony between quality and velocity, right? I mean, we have to have the same amount of quality throughout with every deliverable, but at the same time, velocity, what I mean by that is just the speed at which we work. There's so much aggressive A/B testing that we need to keep up with the demands. I mean, there's a point where ads in the social casino space kind of cannibalize itself because if you see something cool, you want to execute on that, but that dilutes the market, right? So what do you do to combat that? You just try to innovate and try to do and mine your internal creatives in that sense. Creative agility. So, I mean, just the advertising space has so many different creative types. So, having your artists or creatives have like multidisciplinary creatives is important. Whether it's GIFs, videos, HTML5 playables, anything along those lines, right? I mean, that's not to discount the lengths of videos and the nuances in that sense and the details. Keen data-driven creative decisions. It's hard to say fast, but for the most part, it's really. It really hones down into everything that we do is very data-driven. So 80% of our ads are data-driven, and the other 20% is really just experimentals and testing, because that's the only way you can like just surface new creatives and new ideas, different avenues. And that kind of segues into the deep relationship with the UA team, not just the UA team, but the data science team, because you need data. I mean, we're creatives, but we're not magicians, right? So we need actual numbers to interpret and then execute based off of that.
Right. Important insight there, I think, for the audience too, is you guys sit all together in the same office. Yep. So you guys not only have a relationship, you have a close working relationship. Like you guys communicate on the regular, and I think I've seen the difference in like what that can deliver when you are all working that closely together. Yeah.
And what's interesting too is that each designer has their own title, but at the same time they're not siloed. So there's a lot of cross pollination between games. There's a lot of conversation. It's an open floor plan, so there's conversations about, okay, let me try this, how about this and this and that. So there's a lot of different avenues we can take in terms of creatives. So the next one will be the panoptic assessment of advertising landscape. So what I do stress is that you don't look at social casino ads, you look at everything across the board, casual, mid, and even just hardcore gaming, right? I mean, you can draw inspiration from that regardless of how or whatever your workflow is as a creative. I mean, even the UA team, if they're interested in something and they see something cool on Pinterest, we'll take that into consideration and just execute.
It's great that your team has like, the latitude to do that.
Yeah. And the last one's kind of my favorite. It's kind of success through failed experimentation. So that's what I mean about the 20%, is that we have to experiment and fail at a very fast pace. Only because we can actually surface the great ideas that can perform moving forward, right? I mean, we're not just sitting there looking at the competitive landscape and saying, hey, let me try that out. No, it's actually drawing things from anything, really. And I think that's the fun part of being the part of the creative team and leading the creative team, is that they have freedom to do whatever they want 20% of the time.
It's fantastic. So right now, like, we're going to jump a little bit into the partnership that our companies have. Something that's new to talk about is at Bidalgo. If you don't know us, we're a Facebook marketing partner primarily. We work with all the large social channels like Google UAC, Snapchat, Pinterest, and Apple Search. We've always used AI technology in the background to optimize ads, but it was never really visualized until recently we launched the Creative AI dashboard. So just really quickly, what this does is that it takes in all your campaign data and kind of buckets everything into these 4 asset groups: creative, the images and videos, the text copies, the lookalike audiences that you target, and the likes and interests buckets. And then you get a score versus the industry benchmark on both the quantity of each asset and then the quality, which is actually like a data science-driven outcome of, is the asset going to produce an ROI positive result. Yep. So more importantly, too, like what you can get out of Creative AI is actually AI will generate a creative brief for you. And for anyone who's not familiar with creative brief, this is something, like that you guys work off creative briefs to produce new creative, right?
Exactly.
So what we're going to do really quickly is we're going to look at one of the insights from the Creative AI creative brief. So to just further explain, Creative AI actually uses image recognition and deep learning on all the creative. So it can pull all the color palettes across all of your creative. Yep. And I can show you in this example, we have the top 3 performing color palettes and then the bottom 3 performing color palettes. So once you have these insights, it's always fascinating to hear the methodologies that clients have built on that. So maybe you could walk us through, example of like, once you know something like my best performing color palettes, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, sure. I think for one, this is a complete gem in a sense that for creatives, looking at something and really visualizing it, it's a plus, right? With this, it shows you the top 3 and the top worst, or the worst performing color palettes. So this combined with different IPs, different, just overall just execution for artwork, I think it's extremely valuable, right? And this is what we kind of implement with our creatives.
Right, and like a lot of times we talk about, and we're going to get into that right now, about the difference between evolving and hacking, like you mentioned 80-20 rule. Like what might a methodology be like if you're going to evolve, like say you have like an example, you can click that gold color palette there, your best performer, get the example. how would you use the brief to evolve that creative?
Sure. From a high-level perspective, I mean, we can take one ad, and based on the top-performing creatives, we can actually implement those colors and see if there's any sort of variation in performance. So I think that's one obvious way to do it.
Right. That's really, like, it's interesting to see those methodologies. So let's talk a little bit more too. Like, we just touched on it, and let's dive in a little bit further. Like the life cycle of creative, especially channels like Facebook, where it's easy to fatigue creative. I think, like, talking about, like, for those in the audience who are not familiar with, like, the different directions that you can go, evolving, taking the winners and making iterations, and then hacking. Maybe you can explain it a little bit more.
Yeah, so let's start from left to right, right? I mean, you have launch. You'll have a set of assets, let's say 4 different assets, and you'll launch them. And you start going into the creative hacking stage where you'll get data from the UA team or the data scientists. And, you find the winning elements, the storyboarding, and then you can actually do the A/B testing for ad copy and just have a discussion about overall A/B testing. Obviously, you'll hit that peak, and it'll start fatiguing. And this is where the creative evolution starts kicking in, is like you really see the performing ads, and you take that and you scale it, right? I mean, that involves using compelling parts of the ad and just repurposing it by breaking it down into 3 categories. And what we use for those 3 categories is game premise, game challenge, and then game rewards.
Right, and then, like, that evolution is really how you get to that desired state there, just being really stable at scale.
Yeah.
Which your team is just masterful at. So, talk about, like, the different KPIs that you measure for each sort of direction. Like, you're looking at different things when it comes to evolution and hacking.
Sure. Yeah, this is the creative KPIs. I mean, this is set for, obviously the UA team or anybody else that wants to look at it, but it's really for the artists. So we have a benchmark of where to go. It's really 2 bins. It's short-term versus long-term. So short-term is, obviously the overall conversion rates. That's the calculation, and I'm sure you guys can look that up. But bare minimum, 10K impressions and 100 installs to give you some sort of meaningful number. And it trickles down into potential high performers. And then with that, we can actually optimize through iteration, right? And this is where we can actually use the Bidalgo creative AI and the color palettes to do different versions. But the core of it really is the creative hacking part. And as far as long term, it's the ROAS. I mean, you want ads to actually monetize. So, it's 2-week rolling on 7-day ROAS. These are creatives that actually monetize and get you those high value users. And just from that point on, you just maximize through scale, which is the creative evolution.
Yeah, it's really important to let people know that, like, ultimately you are, when possible, measuring creatives by the return on ad spend.
Right.
Great. So we're going to get into a little bit more fun, interactive part. It's a little bit more of like a teaser for the creative quiz show later, too. Yeah. So we're going to look at some of the examples that your team has produced and walk through and see if the audience can catch, like, which ones are the best performers here. So let's jump right into it.
All right.
Okay. So we've got.
So pretty much the elements to be used in these 2 videos are listed there. The HOV logo, 3D coin showers. Anything that we can integrate into these videos they're not identical, but they have the same elements, right? That's the catch. So.
Right. You guys are great at really isolating the variables as well, too. So I've noticed that. So, all right. So we're gonna ask the audience. So who in the audience, raise your hand if you think the video on the left was the better performer. Okay, well, we have some people. All right.
Not too bad.
All right, now, those who think the one on the right is the better performer, raise your hand. Okay, a lot more people think it's the one on the right. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, look at that. It's the one on the right. So some people are feeling very smart right now. You can see the difference in performance as well.
Right. Any thoughts on why? For those who voted or didn't vote?
All it does is prove that testing is the only way to really know. Okay, so we talked about evolution. So this winning creative now, these are examples of how you actually took this winner, right?
Yep. So based on the creative hacking, obviously we found a winner. And from there, we go from game premise, game challenge, and game reward. So these 3 bins we actually take in terms of splitting this ad into to scale a little bit more. So
right. So like we're going to quickly go through another quiz. So take a look at this creative cluster here. Who thinks that premise was the top performer? Raise your hand right now. Almost no, 0 people. Okay. Game challenge, if you think that's the top performer, raise your hand. Just a few tentative people. Okay. Looks like game rewards. Who thinks that's the top performer?
Excellent.
All right. So let's see what the winner was. Oh, look at that. Absolutely nobody picked up on that one. And it just, again, it just really underscores, you know, the importance of testing, that close relationship with the UA team. So now we're looking at that scale and stability phase here. I think this slide is fantastic. It shows the different variations that you got.
Yeah. So obviously from a scale and stability standpoint, the game premise was the winner, and hence we create video variations on it. I mean, this is not limited to this landscape version of it. I mean, there's obviously 3, but I mean, this can actually translate into portrait 1x1s, anything across the board. So you see the nuances, but they're exactly the same ad.
Right.
But people do respond differently to these types of ads.
Oh, it's great. Just by viewing it, you can see how nicely isolated each variable is. And then on the far right there, you have the examples of the HTML5 playables that are kind of the outcome there.
Yep.
And so I think we're going to, talk a little bit about that right now. Since that's like a very, very hot topic, and playables now are becoming available even on Facebook.
It's becoming ubiquitous at this point, so this is where it's going outside of video. I mean, those are just, on the right side, is just best practices, in my opinion. I mean, it's the next wave of advertising. It's highly gamified. It's optimized for engagement. You have full control of the user experience. It's the try before you buy model. And the rule of thumb is honestly just low CTR, high conversion rates.
Right. You're getting like people who are engaging with this ad really understand what the game is, and if they get to the point of install, it's like they're already highly interested, highly qualified user at that point. So let's wrap really, really quickly, go through some best practices, some takeaways for everybody. Like I said, it's important if you don't have this type of creative capability inside your company, what you can learn and take away.
Sure. Best practices for building an ad creative team. It's finding harmony between quality and velocity. I mean, most times ad creative teams are pretty overwhelmed, but you have to find that balance between quality and velocity. And if you need help, you need to get those remote studios in place. Agility in ad creative types in this industry, you can't just stick with video. I mean, it could be video next week, the following week could be carousels, and then now it's HTML5. So having those different disciplines will definitely help scale that in that aspect. Mine data to surface internal creative trends. That's just taking your personal creatives in-house and just really looking at the data, and just finding those formulas. Always rethink winners and revitalize them. So what I mean by that, let's say you have one ad working. If you want to reskin it to see if it works for a different IP, do it, because you won't see results if you don't. Right. And the last one is pretty awesome. So experiment, fail, revisit, and renew. So this is very cyclical in the office, and we pretty much adhere by it every day. You have to just try different things. I mean, without it, then you're just at a stalemate.
Right.
Creative-wise.
It's great that like your team, it has this amazing capability, but it has the freedom to fail, because that's such an important piece of being successful in performance marketing. Yeah, they inevitably evolve into like these unremitting thirst for performance marketing. So it's kind of interesting to see that. All right. Well, that is the chat, Jay. Thank you so much. Thanks.